Okay, good morning. Today is December 7th, 2019, and we're here with John Holmberg, former council member with the city of La Habra. Good morning, John.
Good morning, James.
John, first of all, where were you born?
I was born I lived in Whittier for my first 5 years.
Okay.
And then we moved to La Habra when I was entering kindergarten.
Kindergarten. And where did you go to kindergarten? Where was your schooling at growing up?
I went to Lowell Elementary School, and then Jordan, and then Starbuck, and then La Habra High School.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up here in La Habra.
You know, it was quite normal. I don't know anything stands out in my mind. Typical middle-class family living. We lived on the border of Whittier and La Habra and Valley Home, so across the street was Whittier and across was LA County. School was, big focus, family.
And your parents, what did they do for a living, and who were your parents?
Yeah, my mother, who was Susan Holmberg, she was a school teacher.
Okay.
And my dad, Ivan Holmberg, he was a civil engineer and worked for the San Gabriel Valley Water Company.
Okay. And how many siblings did you have?
I have two sisters,
Okay.
Suzanne, who was 3 years younger than me, and Nancy, who was 5 years younger than me.
And any involvement in any particular activities in high school or?
No, I was in drama for 1 year. Basically just a student. I attended a lot of the sporting events, but was not really active in the school per se.
Now, what's your fondest memory growing up?
I think fondest memory probably are the family vacations we had, as we would take vacations and ended up visiting relatives in Iowa and Nebraska several times who were on my mother's side. Those the vacations probably were one of the fondest memories.
How would you describe La Habra in your early years growing up?
I would say La Habra was a kind of small town, very middle class, family oriented. You knew all your neighbors and.
Okay. Tell me, John, did you attend college or did you go any advanced after high school?
I did. I started out at USC for 1 year, and then I went to Fullerton College and Cal State Fullerton.
And what was the first job you ever had, and when was that?
First job I ever had, I worked at a furniture store called Georgetown Manor, which was on Whittier Boulevard, just outside La Habra in Whittier.
And then later on, what were some of the careers that you held growing up and going?
Okay, yeah. I worked at El Cerrito School as an aide for several years, probably 5 or 6 years, and then in 1981 we started a company that was worked on foreclosure properties, and did that until we sold the company about 2 years ago.
And today, actually, you referee. How did you get involved in becoming a referee?
I was always involved, like sports, and it turned out that there was a summer, back then it was a 10-inch, they called 10-inch, T-ball 10-inch league, and I tried to get a job there one summer, and I didn't get it, but they used me as kind of ROP program, so I was a volunteer in that. And then that following fall, I was watching a sports game at Starbuck Junior High, and the one who ran that program asked me to be a referee, and I referee the junior high games, and that's how it started.
So what's the most challenging part about being a referee?
I think just basically, one, you got to be in shape, you got to know the rules, and then you've just got to have an even temperament to deal with all the things that happen, whether it's, coaches getting excited, players getting excited, and all that.
So what's your most memorable experience of being a referee, that were most challenging?
Most challenging? Let's see.
Does anything really stand out?
I think probably bad calls stand out more than others, and I like one time I remember, and this is not a bad call, but since it happened here in La Habra, I was at La Habra High School under the goalpost, and someone threw a firecracker on the field.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that was rather, and that was probably 25, 30 years ago. Well, that was kind of a shocking experience.
So take me back to, you were very, very young when you decided to run for city council. Take me back to what was going on back then and your decision to run for city council.
Okay, I was always interested in politics. So in 1978, I first ran, and there were 2 vacancies. And there was no issue-oriented thing that I was running on, but there were 2 vacancies. I'll just throw my hat in. I didn't win then. But then 1980, I ran again because there was another vacancy then, and I got more support from people. And so then that's when the infamous...
Who was on the ballot back in 1980?
1980, okay, I'll try to remember then.
Okay.
Dorothy Waddell and Earl Roget
Okay.
were on the ballot. Myself, Robin Young, and beyond that, I don't remember.
And who prevailed in that year?
Well, that's the interesting election.
Okay.
You probably
Yes.
know about this. Earl Roget and Dorothy Waddell won the first 2 spots. There were 3 spots open.
Okay.
Robin Young and I tied. We had the same exact number of votes for the 3rd spot. So we had a recount. The recount came down to, it was tied again. State law said that the winner shall be chosen by lot. So they put the names in a box. The mayor at that time, Marion Corbett, drew the name out, and my name happened to be drawn, so I was on the council.
So, I mean, what did you think back then on election night? And back then, they used to count the ballots here at City Hall, if I recall.
That's correct.
I mean, how did you feel when you realized you're in a deadlock?
Well, actually, that night,
Yeah.
I was actually ahead.
Okay.
And one of the precincts had transposed a couple numbers
Okay.
by mistake. So I think I was ahead like maybe 19 votes. And on Friday after the election, they found the mistake, and it turned out we were tied.
Okay.
So it went from exhilaration to, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? So we went through a recount, and I earned the nickname from several people, Landslide.
Uh-huh.
And
So, how was that relationship and that situation between you and Robin Young back then?
well, I don't really think, I mean, we knew each other, we
Yeah.
talked, but I've never really known Robin other than as a council member. So I don't think there's any animosity between us. It's just the fact that that's the way the election turned out.
So, how old were you when you first took the seat back in 1980?
I was 23.
23. And then when you took the oath of office, what was your feeling back then when you finally made it and you got on the city council? What
Well,
was
it
your
was a feeling of pride and wanting to accomplish, you got to do something to accomplish something for the city, to work for the citizens of the city.
So you're in the seat. Now, what is the vision of John Holmberg once you took the seat?
Yeah. I think I always liked the economic aspect of being on the city council. So, have your budget balanced, trying to get things done, but you've got to do it within the parameters of what the finances allowed. Back then, Prop 13 had passed 2 years earlier, so the finances of the city had suddenly drastically changed. Whereas usually property taxes, now we're going mostly to the state, whereas I used to stay a lot with the city. So finances changed a lot back then.
And that first term or those first early years, who were some of your colleagues on the city council that you worked with?
Okay, when I first got on the council, there was Burt Ward, Marion Corbett, Earl Roget, Dorothy Waddell, and myself. In 1982, well, let's see, let me put it, I'm trying to remember, this is hard to remember back almost 40 years ago, so Marion Corbett passed away as a council member, and I believe Kent Roberts was appointed then.
Okay.
Burt Ward, so in 82, then Burt Ward decided not to run again. Bill Mahoney replaced Burt Ward. So then in 82 is Dorothy Waddell, myself, Kent Roberts, Bill Mahoney, and Earl Roget. And then in '84, Earl Roget, he had resigned a little bit earlier, so he didn't run again, and Jim Flora took his place. 1986, Doug Bistry took Kent Roberts' place. And then 1988, Beth Graham came back to the council and took Dorothy Waddell's place. And so that's a scenario through the 80s.
So in those early years, how was it working with your colleagues? Any big battles or anything that particularly sticks out back then?
I mean, you always have disagreements, but
Yeah.
the disagreements were usually friendly. And I think there were some disagreements back then. Probably the biggest one was development, whether some people were opposed to apartments, and others thought that that was a needed use in the community, and was, if the property was zoned that way, that they should be built. So that was probably the biggest disagreement in the probably early to mid 80s.
Now back then, now looking back, somebody that people considered somewhat controversial was the city manager, Lee Reisner. How was it working with Lee on the city council?
Yeah, I thought Lee was an excellent city manager. He definitely was a financial whiz, because frankly, La Habra, when you have to depend on sales tax, I mean, we didn't have any great sales tax revenue like Bray has a mall. If you have a mall, you're in great shape. You had car dealers, you're in great shape. Well, La Habra wasn't situated for that. Yeah. So he was a very good financial expert, and he kept the city, in. I mean, I always attribute, while the city council makes the decisions, you've got to rely on the staff to do everything to carry out those decisions. So I thought he was a very good financial wizard with the city.
Looking back, what are some of those projects that you worked on over your years on the council that kind of stick out that you remember?
Yeah, and I was I figured that was probably a question you might ask, and I was trying to think about that. We did the Fashion Square was redeveloped at that time, because Fashion Square, by the time we got in the council, the old Buffums and Bolex were gone or soon to be gone, so that was redone. Towards the end of my first 12 years in the council, started working on the golf course and the development in the Westridge area. And those were some of the bigger
So you had
developments.
2 stints on the city council, and you took a break. So run by that part, what year you were the council and you took a break?
Okay, so I left the council in 1992.
Okay.
So I'd served 3 terms, and then I came back in 1996 and served 1 more term till 2000.
So what made you decide to come back for one more shot at this?
Well, there was an opening. Jim Flora decided to resign, or not resign, he retired. And I somewhat missed being on the city council, and people had approached me, so I said, okay, I'll go ahead and run again.
Looking back at all years on the city council, what do you think was the most challenging decision or the most challenging part of being on the city council?
Well, I always thought challenging part probably was dealing with the budget all the time, because La Habra just is not, a financial, a lot of money that the city has, so you always have to deal with that in a careful way, while funding your major things like police and fire and city staff, but it always was challenging.
Looking back at all your decisions and stuff, would you do anything different on the council?
Yeah, probably. For instance, I think there was, and this is a minor one, and no one would probably remember this. This is one I always thought, maybe I've changed my mind, is that at Habra and Whittier, there was Constitution Park, and there was a thoroughfare where you could go from Habra onto Whittier, from Whittier onto Habra without stopping. Yeah. They had that, and the decision was made to change that, so it was just a regular turn rather than you can go without stopping. And looking back on that, and there was a lot of opposition to that. The reason to do it was, I think, they said for the safety of the citizens there at the senior center or the senior living location there. But I'm not. looking back at it, I'm not sure that I would have made that same decision. I agreed to take that turnout, but I'm not sure that that was made in all for safety reasons.
Yeah. What would you say you're the most proud of all the projects you got to work on the council? What are you most proud of?
Gosh, I don't know. So I think we got like the DARE program into the schools, and it was with the police and the schools, and I was very happy that we did that. And while that's changed over the years, and now it's different. It started back in the 80s where you had a DARE officer in the schools talking about DARE is probably a term people don't know right now, but drug abuse resistance education. And we got Officer Cindy Knapp was in the schools for probably a couple decades doing that.
So it's hard to believe it was 40 years ago that you were on the council when this started, right?
Right, yes.
So looking back, what advice would you give somebody that enters the world of politics for the first time, a newcomer on the city council?
Well, be prepared to listen. I'm going to listen to all sides. You probably should know something about budgets. That's very important, because the budget is where the whole year happens when you want to do something in the city council. It basically revolves around money for the most part, 90+%. So you should know that and be willing to count to 3, because if you want to get something done, you need 2 other members of the council to agree with you. And always working with staff. They're always helpful in helping you get your point across and desires.
So working with staff and council, who were some of the staff members, some of the council members back in the day that you worked with here that you recall?
All right. Well, there's a number of them. I mean, I mentioned the council members I was with.
Right.
And the city, we talked about city manager, Greg Kind of community services. Yeah. Eddie Evans he was in charge of kind of redevelopment and all that.
Yeah.
Those are 2 names. Then you talk about people who were at the museum. Kathy Michaels was there to start out. And let's see, who else will we work with? There's Estelle Burton worked with the senior citizens. Sarah Morris was in the treasury, or was a treasurer.
So looking back,
let me give you planning with Kathy Kawamura.
Okay.
Yeah. So dealt with all those people.
Yeah. So looking back and looking at La Habra today, are you surprised with all the changes going on that have occurred?
Yeah. It's always. I mean, it's always surprising, but change is going to happen, and change, for the most part, is usually good. So yeah, it's things that happen in La Habra are good.
Do you ever desire to come back and serve on the city council? I know you don't live in La Habra anymore, but whether it's La Habra Heights or any in the world of politics anymore?
No, I've been there, done that. I'm not going to be involved in politics anymore.
No more.
No
Why?
More. Oh, like I said, I've been there, done that, and I think it's good for different people to get involved, so you kind of pass the torch along.
So how does it feel after serving so long that you did on the city council, and then you get out of that, and you're no longer high profile, you're not making the decisions. I mean, how do you adjust to no longer being able to make the decisions and passing on the torch, so to speak?
Oh, it didn't bother me in the least. I think you've got to realize that you've done your time, and it's time for others to do their thing, and you got to have confidence that most of those people will do good things, and that's what most people are there for, not for themselves, but to better the community. And everyone has different views of how that's done, but I think you just let people go and do their thing.
Overall, what do you think the legacy you left here while serving on the council?
Well, I think people will say I was pretty conscious about the budget, and that was my thing I was most interested in, because that determined everything that happened in the city for that year, when you saw how to spend the money, how to save it for a rainy day.
What would you say was your most memorable council meeting?
Most memorable council meeting. Hadn't anticipated that question, so I have to think about that one. Gosh. We did have long hearings on, and I forget the name of there was a strip joint, something
Pelican?
theater.
It was the
Pelican
Pelican?
Theater, yeah.
Okay.
And we were there for hours, and that's the longest one. We were probably there 6-8 hours
Yeah.
with testimony from early in the afternoon to at night, and that's probably the longest.
Which was a strip club, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And what happened? What all transpired? Was it approved? Not approved?
Well, it had opened, and if I recall right, I mean, there's really not a whole lot you could do. You could put restrictions on them, but
Yeah.
you couldn't shut them down.
Yeah.
So the hearing was basically to make sure they followed through with all of their restrictions, and that I think there's testimony that they had and all that, but they stayed open for a while, but eventually they left the city.
So, John, do you have a motto in life?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Okay, now, take me back now let me get a little more personal information from you. Now, where did you meet Cynthia?
We met at La Habra High School
Okay.
in 1972.
You were both going to school there? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
We're both in the same graduating class.
Okay. And did you date in high school then, or how did that all
Yeah,
work out?
Not really. I mean, we went to a dance or two together,
Uh-huh.
but it's more like more going out together after high school.
Okay. And what year did you end up getting married?
We got married in 1990,
1990, okay.
so it's many years.
And
We
now
graduated.
How many years does that make you married now?
So 29 going on 30.
Wow. And 2 children.
2 children, Matthew, age 28, Elizabeth, age 26.
And what are these young children doing now?
Matthew is an attorney. He works for a law firm in Santa Fe Springs, and my daughter Elizabeth is a therapist, and she works out in the LA County area.
Now, one thing that I truly admire about the Holmbergs is your entire family has a tremendous involvement in community services. Well, why is that? Why do you guys give back so much?
Well, I think that's part of being a member of the community, and that you need to be involved in the city you live in. I mean, not everyone can do it, but we've always done it with our kids, with various charities. My wife's involved in Kiwanis, very much involved. I was involved with the kids in the theater when they were growing up, and so.
So, what's your fondest memory of your children?
Probably just in general. I mean, they grew up to be everything we wanted them to be.
Uh-huh.
My son's a lawyer. My daughter has a master's degree, so it makes you proud that your kids have grown up to be good and decent human beings.
Do you think any of your kids have any desire to follow their father's footsteps into politics or anything further?
No, my son used to, but he's decided that's not where he wants to go.
Uh-huh. What advice would you give your kids today?
I'd say just be good human beings, and get involved with your community as you see fit to, but just to be good humans, and caring and compassionate, and they are.
Yeah, they certainly are. They certainly are. So, John, how would you like to be remembered?
As someone who cared about the community, did right by the community, took in all the aspects of the decisions I made, and made the decision based on the facts as I saw them.
Fill in the blank. John Holmberg is?
John Holmberg is a father and husband and father of 2 great kids. That's I think is most people's legacies, what their kids are.
So tell me, what was the Fashion Square here, and then how did that get phased out?
Yeah.
And what happened with that?
Well, Fashion Square had, and I think I'm sure it's developed in the 60s. So it had a store called Bufham's at one side and Bullock's at the other side. Bullock's was a really high scale retail that probably in essence didn't probably fit in La Habra at that point in time, but there weren't no malls, or were not, like the Bray Mall was not around at that point in time. So you got the two at the ends, and then you had stores in between. Well, one of them went out, I forget which one went out first, then the other went out. So it had to be redeveloped. And there was always a consensus it was going to be commercial. I don't think it would have been anything else, but it was redeveloped into something pretty neat now.
Mm-hmm. And John, were you involved in the building of the community center?
I think that came, gosh, you know what? I don't have an absolute memory of that,
Okay.
whether it
Okay.
came after me or
Okay.
just after me or.
So the
just
second time
before.
you came on the city council, who were some of your colleagues that you worked with?
Okay, so when I got back on in '96, there was Steve Anderson, let's see, Juan Garcia, myself, Dorothy Rush, and because I think Steve Simonian came on after that in '90,
Okay.
just before '98. So he was
Okay.
appointed to replace. God, I don't remember now.
Art Cheverton, I think.
Dave Cheverton.
Or
Okay,
Dave
could have
Cheverton,
been.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, could have been. He was appointed to replace Dave. So
Yeah.
I probably came back, and then Dave left soon after I came back, probably.
So you have Steve Anderson, who later on passed away. How was it working with Steve?
Work with all of them was fine. Steve was very dedicated to the city.
Yeah.
There's no doubt
And
about that.
and you know, what were your thoughts at the untimely death of Steve?
Yeah, it was very sad. Yeah, but he left a legacy that's well preserved in the city, where with all his volunteer work with the Little League, the softball, the Sonora High School.
Now, is there anything that you would like to see happen in La Habra for the future? What are some of your, if you'd like to do something here in La Habra, or think La Habra should get on track and work on?
Gosh, I can't really think of anything that is so. I think you always have to worry about commercial development, that you have that income coming in from commercial development to provide for the services the citizens want. And I think that's always a focus that we should have. But other than that,
When people ask you about La Habra, what do you tell them?
I tell them we have the motto caring community, and that's what La Habra is. There are so many nonprofits here, so many churches, people who just go about their daily workload, but then they get involved in the community. It's just a really, what you might almost call the Midwestern type of a city, where people just know each other and they're involved in the city.
Okay. Thank you, John.